What is a security deposit and how much should you be expected to pay for your commercial real estate lease? Hi, I'm Michael Golden with Lease Review. Today we're talking all things security deposit. A security deposit is a sum of money that the tenant will pay to the landlord, typically at lease execution, for the landlord to hold throughout the duration of the entire lease term to make up for any shortfalls or deficiency that the tenant may have during the lease term. How much is a standard security deposit? As with most commercial real estate transactions, there is no true standard. But if we were forced to give one, we'd say a security deposit is typically equal to the first month's rent, and a tenant will be required to give the first month's rent and a security deposit equal to the first month's rent, so 2 months' rent up front. If your landlord's asking for more than 1 month's rent for the security deposit, that's not reason for alarm. Some new businesses or tenants that don't have the best credit are just simply asked to put up more security for the landlord. This is completely normal and it's not reason for alarm. Your landlord's not necessarily trying to just take advantage of you and get as much money up front as possible. And in some cases, a tenant in a competitive landscape that's competing for a space that many tenants want will offer to give 6 months rent up front just to hold the space for them. Okay, so a quick tip for landlords. Some tenants won't pay a security deposit, and that's completely normal as well. If you have a Fortune 500 tenant or a tenant that's been around for 100 years or always pays their bills, has a strong balance sheet, and has locations all across the world, you probably don't have to worry about that tenant. Sure, having a sum of money makes it easy for a final lease accounting, but it's not absolutely necessary. We have received questions before from tenants that say, I pay my rent every single month on time and I pay all the expenses. Does the landlord have to hold this sum of money because it's just sitting in a bank account somewhere not earning any money or interest? Typically, the landlord is going to want to hold some sum of money to make up for any deficiency or shortfalls because things change all the time. However, if you negotiate up front in a lease negotiation or during a lease renewal, if you've paid your rent for several years or several months on time and you've been a perfect tenant, you've never had any issues, and you pay everything on time, you can sometimes negotiate either a full return or at least a partial return of your security deposit. Note that most leases will call for, if there's a shortfall from a tenant, a landlord is allowed to dip into the security deposit to make up for the deficiency, and then the tenant is required to make the security deposit whole again, usually within a fairly short period of time. After parting with this money and being away from it for so long, many tenants often wonder, will I ever even see it back again? Of course, after the end of your lease term, you will receive your security deposit back. However, a landlord will typically do a final walkthrough of the space and assess any damage that might have been done, as well as doing a final accounting to account for any expenses such as utilities, taxes, insurance, CAM catch-ups that the tenant will owe at the end of their lease term. The landlord will typically add these expenses up and deduct it from whatever the security deposit is and then return this sum of money to the tenant. However, do note that sometimes these repairs, such as a repaint and a reflooring, if the tenant's done some damage to that space, can get into some pretty large numbers and can sometimes exceed the security deposit. So instead of getting a refund, at times a tenant will get an invoice instead. So don't be surprised if that happens to you. The security deposit is a completely acceptable and normal part of the commercial lease transactions. Tenants should expect to pay at least 1 month's rent up front with the lease execution to the landlord for the landlord to hold during the entire term of the tenancy. But tenants, it's okay, you will get this money back at the end after a final accounting is done by the landlord. If you'd like for us to review your commercial real estate lease, please contact us at lease-review.com. Happy lease reviewing.